with you. And oh, okay. And really pleased to be with you this evening. So let's just move on to the next slide so we can introduce ourselves. Okay, so my name's Wendy Ratcliffe. I'm one of His Majesty's inspectors, and I'm also Ofsted's principal officer for our early education policy. And so what that means is that it's my team who hold the pen on how our policy around how we inspect early years settings. So that's those who are registered with us. So preschools, day nurseries, out of school providers, and also childminders, of course, as well as we also influence the policy around how we look at early years in the school space. So, Sam, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. Hi, everyone. My name's Sam Sleeman Boss. I'm an early years inspector that works in Wendy's team as quality and practice lead. And what that means is that I use my practitioner and inspector insights to help inform our policy and support inspectors to deliver high quality inspections. And Wendy, I can see lots of different types of providers in the comments. So I wonder whether we should tell people a little bit about how we came to be where we are in Ofsted.
I think
So
that's a really good idea, Sam, because you started off as a childminder, didn't you?
I did, yes. And I know you were also home childcare, weren't you?
I
So
was. So I was a nanny for a while, and then I went. The main part of my hands-on experience is in maintaining nursery schools.
whereas I was in preschool leadership, and then I went on to children's centre leadership, and you went to work in the local authority.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a
So
wide
yeah,
range
so
of experience.
yeah, we feel that we've got that background and that experience that is really helpful in terms of our roles that we do now. So as I say, we're really pleased to be with you this evening. And the things we want to cover with you tonight are around our renewed approach for our inspection, the inspection process itself. We also want to talk about the early years toolkit and also a little bit about our report cards. But before we do that, we'd like to, you can see on this slide now, we'd like to just take a moment to recognise the work that you all do for our youngest children, day in, day out. So we're starting with a quote from our Chief Inspector, which highlights the importance of early years. You'll recognise this. And we also want to recognise the incredibly difficult job that you do to support, care for, and educate our youngest children. So thank you for your continuing hard work, dedication, and professionalism. So I'm now going to hand over to Sam, who will talk you through our renewed approach.
Are we going to turn our cameras off, Wendy?
Oh, that's a good idea. We did say we were going to do that, didn't we? Just to save on the broadband. Yeah, let's do that.
Thank you.
And then we can come back on questions.
Yeah, so we wanted to make sure that the changes we proposed work for all early years settings. So in this presentation, we're really hoping that you feel more confident and informed about the changes that we've made. So to start, if we could just move on, thank you. To start, a great reminder that every single one of us, regardless of our role, has a desire to work for babies and children of all ages to receive a high quality standard of education and care. And that's one that enables all children to achieve, belong, and thrive. And this really is about raising standards because children only get one childhood and we will continue to put them first. We want great outcomes for all of our children. And you might have heard our Chief Inspector, Sir Martin Oliver, say, if we get it right for the most vulnerable, we get it right for all children. So for the first time, inclusion is now the focus on every inspection. Parents told us that they want better and more detailed information about their child's preschool, nursery, childminder, or out of school club, highlighting the setting's strengths and areas for improvement. And we also need to be fair to settings. It's really important that we point out where settings don't meet the expected standards and important to celebrate exceptionality. So on all of our inspections, we celebrate strengths, validate leaders' priorities and progress, and highlight where improvement is still needed. And we remain committed to improving how it feels to be inspected while continuing to encourage and support settings to raise standards. So inspections can help you as leaders and practitioners focus on delivering your expectations more efficiently and effectively. And by that, we don't expect any settings to be doing more than it needs to just for Ofsted. We're really committed to working with you from the outset to determine the areas of inspection focus and agree the most appropriate activities tailored to your setting. And as I said, we continue to put babies and children first, breaking down barriers to learning and well-being, their progress and achievement by raising standards, especially for the most disadvantaged and vulnerable. If you wouldn't mind moving slides, please. So this is why we've introduced that separate evaluation area of inclusion and why inclusion is a key theme across other evaluation areas. And as part of the inclusion evaluation area, our inspections look at how settings are addressing barriers to learning for all children. And we'll always start with those that the government asks settings to focus on, whether that's through statutory obligations or non-statutory guidance. And that's why we're particularly emphasising those from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds, those with special educational needs and or disabilities, and those known or previously known to children's social care. We'll also evaluate how well settings ensure high quality support for all children who may face other barriers to their learning and or well-being. Working with you, leaders, to understand your context, informed by data and professional dialogue. We've also revised how we describe inclusion, and we agree with the feedback that we received that it isn't for Ofsted to define inclusion, and so we describe this as our approach to inclusion, which is captured in the way that we've drafted our toolkits.
Thanks, Sam. So before Sam takes you through the toolkit, let's look at what has changed. Let's move on to the next slide, please. So inspectors will consider data in understanding the settings context. Now, this is published data. It's published data for inspectors to understand the context of the local community. So we will look at local area information, including deprivation data, take up of early years pupil premium, obesity levels and oral health data. And you'll also have access to this data as well. Inspectors make the notification call before 10 a.m. because we do recognise, not sure why we did this, but we recognise that calling at lunchtime is one of the busiest times of your day. So we will call earlier in the morning to notify you of your inspection. We will also use an email for sharing and receiving information before the inspection. So an email will be sent to leaders, signposting them to useful information about the inspection, as well as asking them to prepare data needed about the children and the staff at your setting. So things like the numbers of children on roll, numbers of children in receipt of EYPP, qualifications of staff, that kind of thing. And we will also have what we call a planning call with you ahead of the inspection. So this is for inspectors to understand the unique context of your setting's curriculum overview, and what you see as your strengths and priorities for improvement. This then means that we no longer need to complete a learning walk. And that's because that information is now gathered through the planning call. What we will do is we will make shared observations and have increased and ongoing professional dialogue with you throughout the inspection. And this is something we were already doing with childminders, and we feel that this is something that this approach is now beneficial to do across all of our early years inspections. And then for childminders, we will inform childminders of the day we will be inspecting. So as a childminder, we will call within 5 working days and notify you of the inspection. And with the inspector, you will agree with them which day is best to inspect, taking into account the children who will be attending. And then for out of school providers, we will no longer be doing the met, not met outcome. And instead, for you, all the evaluation areas except safeguarding grades are used. Not except safeguarding, but instead of we will grade the evaluation areas, but we'll come on to that in a bit. Okay. So this is a bit more about Ofsted Explore an Area. And this tool is for everyone. Parents and carers can use it to help them make informed decisions about childcare, but also you as leaders. And when we talk about leaders, we also mean childminders here, because childminders, you are the leader of your setting. You might want to use it to explore the interactive maps that show the rates of disadvantage and how your local area compares nationally. And our inspectors will be using this as part of their inspection preparation. And that's because in our recent consultation response, we recognise the importance of taking each setting's unique context into account on inspection. So we will start our preparation for inspection by talking with leaders during that planning call about the context in which you're working. So inspectors will use this Ofsted Explore an Area tool to begin to understand what it's like for children and families within the settings community. This will help us to take each setting's context into account during our observations and our discussions with you as leaders and staff during inspection. Importantly, the data is just a starting point for conversation. I think that's really important to say. We might discuss specific aspects of the data to better understand your setting's unique context, and you'll be able to share with us what you know about the children and the families that attend your settings. Okay, so let's think about what happens before an inspector arrives. So for group providers, as we say, the call must be made before 10 a.m, the working day before the inspection. And as before, for childminders and group settings that do not operate regularly, such as summer play schemes, we will call no more than 5 working days before the inspection, just to check which days you're operating and whether there are children on roll and present. And for childminders, we will discuss with you and identify the most suitable day for the inspection to take place. So you will know when to expect your inspection. Now, you may have heard reference to a nominee. Now, the nominee is a role that may not always be relevant for every inspection, and it's distinct from the nominated individual and does not replace this. So, and if we think about childminders or we think about smaller group-based settings, there's no need for a nominee or any expectation that settings will provide one. It's in large group-based settings where leaders might want to nominate someone to be the nominee if this is practical to do so. Their involvement can help the inspection run smoothly and remain focused and purposeful, but this person must have a thorough knowledge of how the setting operates on a day-to-day basis. And we will, during the notification call, we'll ask if there is a need for a nominee and encourage them to join the planning call as well. Now, when we think about the call for the planning call, we will do this at a time that is agreed with you in the notification call. And the call will not be recorded, but you're welcome to take notes. And the aim of this call is to introduce ourselves and discuss practicalities about the inspection, understand your settings context, and also plan the timetable. And as you would have discussed with the inspector, what you want all children to know and achieve at your setting during that call, there is now no longer a learning walk or a need for one. But it is important to say that when we're thinking about the planning call, there may still be times when we will inspect without notice. I'm sure you'll understand the reasons why we do that. And this will be when our risk assessment deems it appropriate. And this is all explained in more detail in our operating guide and supporting additional guidance. And when we inspect without notice, though, anything that we would have covered during that planning call will be discussed with providers on arrival. Now let's think about what we will do on the inspection itself. So let's just move to the next slide, please. So we will gather evidence to enable us to celebrate strengths in children's achievement, belonging, and ability to thrive. We'll validate your priorities and your progress, and we will highlight priorities for improvement. And all inspections begin with a brief introduction with those at your setting. Inspections are grounded in professional dialogue, and through observations and discussions with the person who knows the setting and the children best, and that's you, inspectors will consider what you as leaders are aiming to achieve, how well you're doing it, and how you know it's working. And throughout the inspection, we will give particular attention to the experiences and outcomes of all children, particularly those who face particular barriers to their learning and or their well-being. Now, most evidence is gathered through shared observations with leaders and ongoing discussions with yourselves and practitioners. We will want to speak with practitioners that are designated to take the lead responsibility for safeguarding, and also talk to the SENCO where appropriate. And again, a reminder for childminders, that's you, of course. And as part of shared observations, inspectors will track the experiences of a case sample of children relative to the size of your setting. They focus on the impact of children's experiences, especially children who are disadvantaged or have special educational needs, or who you as leaders have identified as being particularly vulnerable. We'll be observing children at play and in their daily routines, and we'll also observe those important interactions between yourselves and children. Inspectors will take the time for regular reflection on their own before joining leaders for those collaborative, reflective discussions about what we've seen and heard in shared observations together. And together we'll agree with you who might attend these discussions. And as part of those discussions, we'll encourage leaders to reflect on the shared observations and whether what we've observed is what the settings typically like. Is this what it's like usually on a day-to-day basis? We'll discuss whether any inspection activity needs to be adapted in light of emerging evidence. And these discussions are an opportunity to review the evidence in relation to the toolkit evaluation areas that Sam's going to take us through shortly. And throughout the inspection, inspectors will be considering the experiences of children identified for that case sampling. And as we've said, these will include a representative sample of children of different ages. It will include babies, particularly those who are disadvantaged, those with SEND, those known or previously known to children's social care, and those children who face other barriers to their learning and well-being. And when we inspect the range of different size and type of EY settings, it's important that we inspect in a way that works for your specific context. So we'll make practical arrangements to ensure that the inspection methodology is applied proportionately to your particular context. So, for example, childminders who often work alone, inspectors will be sensitive to the context of each childminder and work flexibly to ensure that you're able to continue to meet the needs of the children in your care throughout the inspection. And if we think about out of school providers, we will not evaluate curriculum and teaching or achievement, as you, as out of school providers, you don't need to be meeting the EYFS learning and development requirements.
Thanks, Wendy. Let's talk about the toolkit, my favourite subject. Okay, if we can move to the next slide, please. So the evaluation areas in the early years are specifically designed to align with the statutory early years foundation stage framework, or the EYFS. Safeguarding standards are graded met or not met in early years, and that's the same in schools and our other education remits. And along with safeguarding and inclusion, the evaluation areas for early years are curriculum and teaching, achievement, behaviour, attitudes and establishing routines, children's welfare and well-being, and leadership and governance. Now, you might have remembered from the consultation that we consulted on having a developing teaching and curriculum, two separate evaluation areas, but we've merged those following the consultation, following your feedback, and now we have a single curriculum and teaching evaluation area. Now, as Wendy said, when there are no early years children present, or I think she was talking about out of school provision, but when there are no early years children present and or on roll at the time of the inspection, inspectors will only evaluate and grade leadership and governance because there's no reliable evidence on which to assess the impact on children of the other evaluation areas. So inspectors will use the leadership and governance evaluation area to determine the provider's ongoing suitability to meet the requirements of the EYFS and the childcare register, if that's applicable, and grade against the expected standard, needs attention, and urgent improvement grades only. And as Wendy said, the learning and development requirements of the EYFS don't apply to before and after school settings and holiday provision. And that includes childminders who only provide care before and after school or during the school holidays for children who normally attend reception or older classes during the school day. So the curriculum and teaching and achievement evaluation areas are not evaluated or graded for out of school settings. Okay, let's explain how the toolkit works for early year settings. So toolkits show leaders or childminders and inspectors the evaluation areas that we'll focus on, and within them, the standards that we evaluate and use to grade settings. Inspectors will apply the toolkit evaluation areas, the themes and the standards, tailoring evaluations to each setting's unique context. Now, nothing in the standards set out in the toolkits should add to a setting's workload, because our toolkits are built on the requirements, the standards, and the expectations already placed on leaders and their setting. And as you know, in early years, this is the EYFS. So inspections can then help you to focus on delivering these requirements more efficiently and more effectively. So we don't expect any setting to do anything just for Ofsted. There's no expectation for settings to do anything different or additional for us that isn't already part of your usual day-to-day business. Nor do we expect settings to have completed any formal self-evaluation, but you might wish to use the toolkit to support continuing improvement. And as we've already said, we've carefully reflected on evaluation areas in our consultation and how these should apply for different types of settings in early years. Now, I don't know if you've got the toolkit in front of you, but if you've been going through while I've been talking, you'll know that there is a covering page for each evaluation area, which includes a summative statement at the top of what the evaluation area considers. And this is designed to help settings and inspectors to see at a glance what the evaluation area is about. Then there follows a statement to remind us that our grading standards are based on what settings are already required to do. And as we've already said, these are based on statutory duties and statutory and non-statutory guidance. And the renewed framework is based on existing professional standards and expectations that settings should already be meeting. And you might have heard our Chief Inspector, Sir Martin Oliver, say the toolkits will make it clearer than we ever have that settings shouldn't be doing anything just for the day that our inspectors come in. They shouldn't be spending a single minute or a single penny on anything that isn't in the best interests of their or your children. And then following that, the toolkit sets out the most significant contributory factors that underpin our approaches to evidence gathering and grading. And this is very much based on the research that underpinned the Education Inspection Framework, or the EIF. Now, we've been clear that our renewed framework will ensure consistency of inspection practice, and we've also made sure that the toolkit is reflective of each remit and the different setting types within it. So in our early years toolkit, we've included an explanation of how it should be applied within different setting types. So if, for example, in achievement that you can see here on the slide, inspectors will consider what practice looks like in a childminder or for the different ages of children. And this shows that the standards are not generic statements, but they're carefully tailored to reflect the different ages of children as well as the setting type. And where relevant, this section sets out the areas that apply to out-of-school settings, as well as when we inspect when there are no early years children present or on roll. So in short, the toolkit seeks to make it clear how we will apply each evaluation area in a setting like yours and what you can expect inspectors to be looking at in practice. Now, once we've set out what an evaluation area covers, if we just move to the next slide, the toolkit then moves into more detail about the kinds of evidence that inspectors will gather. And as you can see on the slide, each evaluation area considers themes and then gives prompts that guide inspectors' observations and conversations. And each evaluation area always starts with a theme about strategic leadership of that area and ends with a theme about inclusive practices in that area. And I know from experience that providers, leaders, practitioners go straight to the grading standards, and that's absolutely fine, but there's some really great information in this section of the toolkit. These prompts they're not a checklist for settings, but they're there to help inspectors think about what to explore and to discuss when we're gathering evidence in context, and to make sure that the evaluation is consistent and fair. So, for example, in curriculum and teaching, inspectors might consider how well the curriculum is sequenced, or how practitioners adapt their approaches for different children within different starting points. And in leadership, prompts might focus on how leaders support professional development and ensure that the curriculum is well taught. So the key takeaway from this slide is that the toolkit makes inspection more transparent. You can see the themes that inspectors will explore through our observations and discussions that will help shape evidence gathering.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sam. So then we come to the next section in each evaluation area. I particularly like this slide. So each evaluation area in the toolkit is graded on a 5-point scale. This is with the exception of safeguarding, which is graded as met, not met. Now, what you see here are the grades we expect to see most often on inspection. So needs attention, expected standard, and strong standard. And the expected standard is in the middle. And this is because it's the baseline for inspection. It reflects what is required of a setting like yours. And it's the starting point for all inspections. And that's why it's in the centre of the page. Now, I just want to take a moment to think about expected standard. Expected standard is a high bar. If you're graded expected standard, you are meeting all the requirements of the EYFS, and the EYFS, remember, the DfE's EYFS, set the requirements for high quality settings. This means that settings graded expected standard are ensuring that babies and children are healthy, they're safe, and have the knowledge and skills they need to start school. They are learning and developing well. This is why we've colour coded it green to visually indicate that hitting expected standard means you're good to go. There are no causes for concern. Now, importantly, one clear distinction is that we will be looking for a secure fit on inspection now, not a best fit. That is, to meet the expected standard or the strong standard, a setting will need to meet all of the standards in that column. You'll see words such as typically, and generally in the expected standard. And that's to recognise that the expected standard is not about perfection. For example, you may have an area of learning which is being developed well, but does not yet quite meet the same standards as others consistently. So if that was the case, the setting may still be graded as having a secure fit within the expected standard. Now, if we look at the needs attention column, this contains indicators, not standards. An evaluation area is likely to be graded needs attention when there is not a secure fit for the expected standard. The indicators in this column, so those 3 bullets that you can see on the slide here, are designed to exemplify why a setting might not be meeting the expected standard. These indicators are deliberately worded positively to acknowledge what leaders are doing, but pointing out where something needs attention as it's not a secure fit within the expected standard. And they're worded in a similar way in each of the evaluation areas. And we've said all along that we expect more settings to have a varied grade profile and more settings that may have areas that need attention. And our Chief Inspector, Sir Martin, has referenced the need for nuanced grading in many of the speeches he's given, stating the grades for specific evaluation areas will allow for a more detailed and representative assessment. Individual grading of the evaluation areas will enable parents and carers to be able to see in more detail what is special about you, what you do well, and what you're continuing to work on. So let's think about the other 2 areas. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. So on that previous slide, we looked at the grades that inspectors will use most often. Now here, we're focusing in on those 2 ends of the scale. Those grades that we expect to see less frequently, which are urgent improvement and exceptional. Now, urgent improvement applies when the expected standards have clearly not been met and where there are serious concerns about the impact of a setting's work in the relevant evaluation area. The indicators explain what this might look like in practice. And these are occasions when significant improvement is needed because the breaches to the EYFS requirements are having a significant impact on children's safety, their well-being, and or their learning and development. But then at the other end of the scale is exceptional. And this is the grade for settings where evidence shows that standards are not only strong, but they're truly transformational. That means everything in the strong standard is already being met securely and consistently, and leaders are making a sustained difference for children and should share this practice beyond their own setting. As we said, exceptional will be rare. When considering this grade, inspectors will consider if a setting's specific practice could support system-wide improvement. Exceptional means practice so unique that it should be showcased. Exceptional means among the very best nationally. So to sum up, both urgent improvement and exceptional, they're really important parts of the 5-part scale, but they will be much less common in practice. The majority of evaluations will fall into those middle 3 grades that we looked at on the previous slide. Okay, let's think about now moving on to report cards. So here is an example of a report card. This design brings together the most popular preferences of parents and professionals that we heard through our consultation, and it combines separate grades, rating scales, and short summaries into a report card. The narrative gives a detailed picture of performance, while that 5-point scale offers the clarity and simplicity that parents have asked us for. So at the end of an inspection, the inspector will write a report card that will reflect the evidence they've gathered. It will be clear and concise and focused on what matters most and informed by your settings context, your evaluations, and the toolkit. It will explain the grade given for each evaluation area, and it will make clear what you as a setting should do to improve. And it will, of course, be consistent with the verbal feedback that you've been given at the end of the inspection. So what happens after the inspection? Now, our post-inspection arrangements regarding report publication are the same as they were under the original EIF. So reports will be sent to you after modification, quality assurance and consistency checking. And in most cases, this is within 18 working days of the inspection. Now, important to say that you can share your inspection findings with whoever you consider appropriate, but you shouldn't be sharing information or making that information public or shared with parents until you've received your final report card. And then you have 5 days to comment on the draft report card. You can highlight minor points of clarity, and we'll respond to those before we publish the final report. Or at that point, that's the time, if you need to or want to, you can submit a complaint seeking a review of the inspection process. And as a reminder, once you receive that final report card, following an inspection, you're required by law to make sure that that's shared with parents. And we've heard feedback from settings that they're worried about how to explain what our new grades mean to parents. And we've now shared a short YouTube video explainer, which you may wish to share with parents to help them understand your report cards. And we can share that link with you this evening. Okay, now let's think about the early years inspection window, because this is something that we are asked a lot about at the moment, because you may well have heard that DfE have, through their Best Start in Life documentation, have asked us to change the frequency of inspection. So currently we inspect early years settings at least once in a 6-year window. However, from the new financial year, so from April this year, we will receive funding to move to a 4-year inspection window. We think this is a really important change because we've heard from you that inspection needs to be more frequent. So as part of this, we will move to inspect newly registered settings as well within 18 months rather than 30 months. What we are doing, we're still working out the detail of what this will look like in practice, and we will update you about what that means for you and your inspection as soon as we can. Sam, back to you.
Yeah, so should we talk about some resources before we go and answer any questions? So if you do have any questions, do pop them into the chat and Wendy and I will go through them. So if you scan this QR code, this will take you to the Early Years Inspection Toolkit. So that's what inspectors and early years providers use to discuss the quality of provision on inspection. You'll find there the Early Years Inspection Operating Guide, and that's the step-by-step guide for inspectors on how to inspect a registered early years setting. And you'll also find the information about early years inspections, and that's for staff and leaders, parents and carers, and the wider public. If we move to, that's it. If you've got any questions or missed when you might be inspected, then all of that is covered in our FAQ blog, which if you scan this QR code, it will take you to that and other blogs from Ofsted on early years. And then if you scan this QR code or bookmark this video, then you will find the new Ofsted report cards and grades, a guide for parents video. And then finally, this final one will take you directly to the playlist where you'll find a recording of the webinar that's most relevant to you. And I also have a little playlist on there that talks about different aspects of inspection, and that's going to be updated imminently with some new videos too. So it's time to take some questions, Wendy.
Absolutely, let's do that. I was just having a look and finding our blog, Sam. So
Should we come back on video?
Yep, let's do that.
So there is a question.